and the people who love them.
Hello, this is The Thing About Cars. Thank you, as always, for joining us. Today, our guest is Amanda. Amanda, how are you?
Lovely.
Excellent. And Amanda, I think we have some pretty interesting things to talk about later on today. But first, our regular participants, and this makes me a very lucky guy. What we've begun to do is segment the show, and this week's theme is called Two Girls in a Car. Except this time we're missing Ben and Dave, so it's actually three girls and a guy in the back seat. Is that what we're calling it? Yeah.
So are we your harem?
Which makes me a very lucky guy.
No, he's our cabana boy.
That's it.
Ooh. Are you suggesting we put Mickey in a thong?
No, we're not suggesting that.
No, I'm not.
Danger.
That would be very bad. Yes. So on mic we have Beka. Are you there?
No, I'm not here.
And Dawn, we've heard you already.
Hello, everyone.
Right. So me, Beka, Dawn, and Amanda, and that's our crew for today. Our Grand Trivia Auto Questions. I have a question which seems kind of lame, right? It's just, I don't know. Maybe I'll ask two of them this time. But the question for today is: the Cannonball Run is an official coast-to-coast automobile race that starts in what U.S. city? Is that starting city New York City? Is it Washington, D.C.? Is it Savannah, Georgia? Or is it Miami, Florida? So those are our choices.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll definitely answer that at the end of the show. I was actually surprised by the answer.
You were surprised by it?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I don't know much about Cannonball Run history, so I don't know where it's supposed to have started. You know, I thought maybe it would have, well, if I thought,
don't give anything away.
Right. We won't give that away. Anyway, that's our trivia question for today. Beka, have you heard about this new, bigger 8-cylinder engine that Ford is deploying to Mustangs and pickup trucks?
Just a little bit. And I'm sitting here reading some of the highlights on it. And I don't know. I mean, are they for sure coming out with this?
That's my understanding. I mean, the thing that stuck out to me, and I hope it is a for sure thing. And what people don't know is that Beka, in past episodes of The Thing About Cars, has sort of decried the loss of an 8-cylinder options for Mustangs and for trucks. And some of the rest of us have sort of tried to defend Ford, saying, 6 cylinders actually outperform some of those 8s anymore.
I hadn't heard that they were going to kill the V8 in the Mustang. Officially or anything, by the even the idea of there not being a V8 option, even somebody suggesting it.
You have this romanticized notion that a V8 should be available for whoever wants it whenever they want it.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
It's just my my idea of the car, personally speaking, would only be true to the car if it had a V8 in it. Yeah. So, the idea of it not having it, but basically what they're talking about here, and I'm trying to figure it out because it almost sounds like, oh, hey, here's what's going to happen. And then it sounds like, okay, well, here's what they're talking about maybe doing. But basically, there is an article from The Drive where for the 2022 Mustang and F-150, they're talking about a 6.8 liter pushrod V8.
Yeah, which is no slouch. It is no small thing. Yeah,
it is not, especially because that kind of figure isn't really normal on the Mustang.
Right.
I'm trying to think of the largest that the Mustang has carried.
I always thought it was the 5-liter engine.
Well, and then the problem was the earlier Mustangs were designated with 302 or 350, and it's a little different. But now the 5.0 is the same as the 302. So something had to have been bigger, but 6.8 still sounds a good deal bigger than what I'm used to hearing about in there. I'm a little more shocked about the pushrod coming back.
Yeah. Dawn, have you ever driven a big V8?
I have, and I love them. Especially in big trucks. I think that this is surprising. I had a Dodge van with a V8 in it. So I have a funny story. It was the first vehicle that I drove when we came back to the States after living in Germany when I was in high school. And my parents dad had moved back to the States, and my senior year in college, they gave me the Dodge van to take to school from Georgia to Pennsylvania. And I remember just flying down the highway with that thing. And it was funny because I was in Pennsylvania and, backing up and down the hills and the dales. And I'm going up a hill, and I'm passing people, but I'm thinking, I'm in a van. It's not a problem. And I got a ticket. I mean, I was going like 95, 100 miles an hour. And I said, I'm in a van. I can't go that fast. They're like, Miss, you were hauling ass. And it was the only ticket I ever got in my life. I remember it was 1987. It was an $80 ticket. It was crushing blow, but yeah.
$80 ticket for 95 miles an hour? That's nothing.
Well, that was 87.
That is nothing.
Remember, it was 87.
Right. That's well before super speeders. And
Yeah,
all
exactly.
that.
But that's a lot of dough back then. That was a lot of beer money. Come on.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Well, kind of an interesting segue though, because in the same article they talk about another V8 for, I think it just says for one of the trucks. I don't think it really gets specific. This engine is dubbed Godzilla, and it's a 7.3 liter V8. Also a push rod.
And so it's interesting when we went and moved to the Dodge Durango, and I wanted a V8 so bad, and we just kept settling for the V6 because of the money. They're so expensive.
Yes, they're terrible.
I think they add $15,000 to the vehicle.
I'm not surprised. Amanda, did you ever drive a big V8?
I have not had a V8. I've had a 6-cylinder.
Yeah.
That's the biggest I've ever driven.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, same here. I don't think any car I've ever owned, I've driven bigger cars, but I don't think any car I've ever owned had a big V8.
Well, I did. I drove it, but it wasn't that great a car. I mean, but the other thing about having a V8 in that Dodge, I could load it up with like 10 of my college buddies and we could go a lot of places. It had one of those seats in the middle, like it had lots of bench seats, and the two behind the drivers could literally, one could flip and there's a table that went in there, and then it could completely lay down and literally like you could sleep in the thing. It was incredible. It was incredible. We drove that thing all over Europe. I drove it all up and down the East Coast, and that V8 was amazing. And I think we had a V8 in Europe because we were on the Autobahn, and we needed to keep up with the Porsches and the Ferraris and the BMWs.
Yeah.
It's very important. You must keep up with the
competition.
competition. Yes.
Well, now the G8 has a 6-liter, and that thing is a monster when it works.
Yeah.
Amazing when it works. I have to always put that caveat, when it works, but I love my V8.
Yeah.
So the one thing that's Sorry,
I was just saying, and tangentially to this incredible, if they bring a V8 back there, is this discussion of liters for engines. It's like cars for some reason maintained a lot of the metrics, and everybody else, like in the United States, we have done, the gallons and the quarts and blah, blah, blah. And so I'm always wondered when I do my own oil or whatever, the oil and stuff, they come in quarts, but you're talking about liters. It kind of gets confusing sometimes.
Yes, absolutely. Well, there is that disconnect between displacement and the amount of fluid it takes to actually run.
Right. That's what I was thinking. They're two different.
Cylinder volume and oil volume are two different regions of the engine. Yeah.
There is no replacement for displacement.
I took the words right out of my mouth. Exactly. Yeah. So the one thing that this Drive article says is that there's no indication so far that the engine will end up under the hood of the Bronco, which seems like a missed opportunity to me, but maybe they'll do that in an upcoming year. Yeah.
I think that's something I need to dig in further and keep an eye on. Yeah. I'm not sure. I might have to sell one of my kids if they do so that I can buy a Bronco. That's horrible. I'm just kidding. Anybody's listening, I would never, but A definite huge pipe dream.
Right. All right. So we'll definitely keep an eye on that. And I'm curious, if our dreams come true and we actually get a sponsor, or better yet, a TV show out of that's called The Thing About Cars, I would happily buy a Bronco for each of us.
And I just took in a deep breath and started choking there. I just saw something really interesting in this article, though.
Oh, what? What'd you see?
It's been proven that the 7.3 liter can fit in a classic or a modern Mustang. It's 4.5 inches narrower than the Coyote 5 liter.
Yeah, the Coyote is yeah.
So depending on the price, and how big of a fan you are, I mean, it might be good for some engine swaps.
I'm wondering how much of a direct replacement it is. Like, is it plug and play or going from a Coyote to the bigger one, the Windsor? I think it's called, not the Godzilla one, but there's the Windsor Star.
I believe they're both Windsors, the Godzilla 7.3 and the 6.8 that they're talking about.
They're both the same engine, just one has more
displacement.
Yes,
I believe so.
Yeah.
That's what it seems to be. But I was obviously rubbing my hands together and laughing maniacally and thinking about other cars, not just Mustang. What would happen if I put a 7.3 liter in the Jeep?
The rest of the Jeep would fall apart.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, there's so many other implications for so much power.
Right.
I'd be the fastest rock crawler on the planet.
You'd be like skipping up those hills.
Bounce.
Yeah.
Like, I can reach the moon.
All right, cool. Thank you, Beka. So, Amanda,
Yes.
how long have we known each other?
Since 2011,
Wow.
which was my first year at AWA.
Oh, so 2012, because I wasn't there your first year.
Okay, then 2012.
Wow. Okay, time flies.
Mhm.
And Amanda's a longtime listener and friend of the podcast, and she and I were recently talking about something she does, which until I saw you with that stuff that day, I did not know that you were part of the ambassador program for Subaru.
Indeed.
So there is an actual, do they call it the ambassador program?
Yes, it is the Subaru Ambassador program. It is.
And do you get selected, or do you walk into the thing and say, hey, now that I'm buying this car, do I become an ambassador?
You volunteer, literally. I didn't know about it when I first bought my Subaru, but I came out of work one day and I found some stuff on my hood of my car, like Subaru swag, and I was very confused for a second. And then I looked at the little, note in there, and it said, that Subaru Ambassador on it. And I was curious, so I looked into it and found it online, and sure enough, it's a legit thing.
Wow. Okay. So what made you think you wanted to become an ambassador?
My absolute love of my vehicle.
There you go.
I mean, that's a significant part of it. I love my Subaru, and I think everyone should drive one. But also, they have a really great mission in general. Subaru has a fairly strong service sort of focus in general, and they sort of align well with my sort of feelings about volunteering and service and things like that.
Yeah, they are a little more open, I think, about their community-oriented mission than
Yes.
many other manufacturers are. So
Very much so. That's sort of become one of the legs sort of their marketing program, is to say, hey, this is what we do.
Yeah. Well, I confess, I do like Subarus. There's at least one or two that I kind of want to drive. And I'm intrigued. I'm very much intrigued. So what are the perks for you as a volunteer? What do you get to do as an ambassador? And to ask what may be a snarky question, what's in it for you?
I get the opportunity to share the love I have for Subaru. And really, I mean, that's the biggest thing. I mean, when you volunteer anywhere, you get to share your love of that organization. And that's true with Subaru as well. I could do more stuff, but being in the Southeast, we don't have a ton of events like other parts of the country, car shows and Subaru like road race rallies and all sort of things that
Oh,
they
really?
do.
Wow.
Yeah, they do a lot of that stuff in other parts of the country, especially out west, where there's a lot more opportunities. And honestly, I've been so busy with life that I haven't really had the chance to really capitalize on my opportunity.
Yeah.
And so I haven't really ever partnered with the dealership or anything like that, but I'm sure I could.
And I
Yep.
was thinking, can you find out who other ambassadors are, and couldn't you all get together and start some kind of Subaru event here, whether it be some sort of, there's plenty of places for rallies in Georgia. I'm just
Well,
saying, you
and
know.
I would add to that, Ken, the thing about cars help.
Absolutely, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and
There's message boards and stuff, so you can
Yeah.
contact anybody. So
Yeah.
Amanda, I'm wondering, I don't know, Subaru's not been on my radar screen. So in addition to the social culture and the, you know, they do talk a lot about giving back and that whole piece, which I think is very appealing, and it's what they work on. What's the thing about the Subaru technically that you really like?
well, having traded in an Ford F-150 for my Subaru Crosstrek, I have to say I'm sort of in love with the ground clearance, the cargo size, the fuel mileage. All of those things really make me pretty happy about the vehicle. I commute 47 miles one way to work, so a lot of highway driving, and I've never had any issues with not having enough power or performance. It has a ton of safety features too, which helps when I'm bleary-eyed first thing in the morning driving into work in the dark. Really, I just like the entire package of the vehicle.
Interesting.
Did you say that you had a Crosstrek? Is that what you said you
I
had?
do. I have a Crosstrek.
That's the one that I like. I mean, I'm not a fan of a lot of the other models, just they're very family car styled, but I have seen a number of Crosstreks that I think are very nice looking.
Yeah, they're definitely, the Crosstrek is becoming more visible. It's becoming a lot more popular because it is a pretty competitively sized crossover, and really it's sort of funny because when I first bought it, probably for the first year, I would maybe see one ever on the road, and now I see them probably 10 times a day.
Wow, I can't say that I've seen that many. Definitely not, but I have seen a number of them recently, and they have a much sportier appearance than the other ones. That, like I was saying, typically seems to be sedanish kind of in appearance.
Yeah, they've definitely made them sort of appealing for the less family car looking vehicle and less station wagony looking vehicle type of market.
It looks more like something that is going to go on a rally as opposed to the grocery store.
Yes,
Yeah,
Well,
and
very
they
much.
and they do. They race them. I mean, they have a whole
They
racing
do.
team.
Oh, yeah.
Indeed.
Well, you'd be
Well-
surprised what gets raced sometimes, but
Yeah, but you know, I mean, it's just an interesting history, and again, it's funny, of all the foreign imports, I always forget Subaru is actually a Japanese car, which is kind of also interesting.
Yeah. Well, I'll reiterate that if there's ever an opportunity to join forces and make something happen locally, then let's do it. I'd certainly be up for that.
I'm sure they would love that. But
So
definitely, even if it's just starting with a car show, you know, something. I mean, as ambassador, and I'm assuming there's a number of ambassadors.
there are tons of them all over the country.
Yeah, and get together, and you know, especially the
it could be a Subaru Expo.
Or even a coming out party, the end of the epidemic, pandemic, whatever, come out and have a Subaru party.
Right. All right, Amanda, we've got a set of questions we like to ask our guests. We don't actually have a name for these questions set yet, but it's 4 questions.
Absolutely.
Yes, the first one is, what is your dream car? Cost not being an issue.
Oh gosh, my dream car.
Are you required as being an ambassador to say Subaru?
No, I'm not required to say anything. Though really, right now, probably my dream vehicle at the moment on the Subaru vein would be a 2021 Subaru Crosstrek hybrid, because they do have an electric gas hybrid
Cool.
that I would love. But beyond that, I would say probably the dream vehicle I have is actually a vehicle that I somewhat own.
Yeah.
It's from my dad's estate. It's a 19, gosh, I can't even remember what year it was, but it's a Jeep Willys pickup truck.
Oh, yeah.
That
The Willies?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's old. I want to say
Mhm.
it's from like the 30s or the 50s, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
it's significantly old, and it was apparently rare because a lot of them have the small back window, and this one has a full-size back window, and so that
Okay.
makes it a little more uncommon.
Yeah.
But it will require much restoration, so I would love to be able to eventually
Yeah.
cause that to happen and be able to drive it.
Wow.
Well, you do know people who do that kind of thing.
Indeed, conveniently.
The second question is, where's your next road trip?
Oh gosh, with COVID, it's been sort of road
Yeah.
trip challenging because I volunteer for the Boy Scouts, and my next big road trip would be to Gatlinburg for Winterfest in February, but that's been canceled.
Oh,
So I would say probably up to Raven County in Clayton, Georgia for Boy Scouts next month.
Oh, go
to
to the
teach an
Dillard
ATV
house.
class.
Go to the Dillard
Oh
house.
God, so good. And there's a tiny little restaurant up north of there in Mountain City called the Cupboard Cafe
oh,
that absolutely gives the food at the Dillard house a run for the money.
Wow.
No
So
kidding.
good. It's like a meat and three kind of restaurant. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. We usually go up there at least once every trip. But
Okay.
like all my kids know about it. They ask about going there every time too when we're up at camp. But beyond that, I have been trying to figure out some time to go up to Great Smoky Mountains National Park and go camping for a couple
Yeah.
days just to get some time to myself.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. Question number 3. What's the weirdest thing you've seen in someone's garage or house?
That's a completely subjective question. You remember I was a paramedic walking into everybody's houses
Yeah.
for years and years, and before that I was an exterminator. So I walked into people's houses when they weren't even home. So I've been into a lot of houses. Oh
I was going to
gosh.
say, are you allowed to talk about these things legally?
There is no confidentiality rule for the
Right.
things you see in people's houses.
Right.
Oh gosh, I can't even begin to think of something that was completely bizarre.
That question is kind of a harder question. We may strike it from the list actually,
Mhm.
but because it's just like, okay, if you say what's the weirdest thing you've seen in someone's garage, a garage is really such a limited space, and what's
Mhm.
weird in a garage anyway? Not much, right?
Right. Well,
So
I've
yeah.
I my perspective is that what's weird to me
Yeah.
is either unheard of to normal people or commonplace.
Right. Right. All right. So we'll revisit that question then and do a substitute. The last question is changing. I've got a list of substitutes here, but the one I want to ask you is cereal a soup? Why or why not?
Cereal is more of a suspension because it
I
is
like that.
solids floating in a liquid.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a food group. So
Okay.
A standalone food group. There should be a cereal on the pyramid.
indeed.
Oh, hey, that's fascinating.
But
Because you
Interesting.
don't
Isn't
have a
a
blend
soup-
of flavors, that's for sure. Well, until it all mushes together.
right.
Well, you can use the same milk over and over for different cereals too, and then you get sort of a mix of
Yeah.
flavors that way.
All right. So let me ask another question then. This is another one of my test questions is, what's the best type of cheese?
The kind that's in my tummy.
I thought you were going to go there. Or say the kind that's in my mouth.
Right.
There you go.
Right.
My favorites right now are probably Havarti or Gouda. So
Yeah, good stuff.
Gouda is really good. It's been hard to find. I've been on an Asiago kick.
Yes.
Yummy.
Well, I'm a cheese agnostic. If it's cheese, I like it. So
Indeed.
Thank you, Amanda. Let's shift gears here and switch to Dawn Drives the Decades, Dawn's segment about historical perspectives on the world of automotive stuff. Dawn, what have you got for us today?
I'm looking at the 70s.
Oh, okay. It was an interesting time for cars.
It really was. And I was trying to think, because style and fashion of the 70s was
interesting.
very, very interesting. I mean, it was such, there's things around hippies and blah, blah, blah. But we've been talking a lot about the 60s and all the changes about, smaller cars and really some awesome cars that came out in the 60s. But the 70s, it seems like we want to forget.
Yes, particularly, how Mustangs suffered because of the fuel crisis.
Well, and actually every car suffered. So I'm doing
some more than others.
Doing some research, and the automobile industry in the 70s really did come under threat from a lot of different angles. There was declining sales for multiple reasons. There was the strike. There was a 50-day strike at General Motors that idled about 350,000 workers. There were a lot of higher quality foreign cars that were coming into the market.
And that's what I was going to say, was that there were a lot more imports then too.
Yeah, Subaru's an example of one of those. But also the leading import at the time was the Volkswagen Beetle. I mean, who didn't have a Beetle or a van? They were just super, super popular and affordable and reliable.
Nobody in my family.
And and then there were a lot of regulatory changes happening. There were, folks in the boardroom were scratching their head because they had to figure out how to put more safety into the vehicles. They had to figure out how to, look at fuel standards. So there was a lot of power design. So there's a lot going on under the hood and around the car and inside the car that I think kept minds busy from actually looking at the model on the outside of the vehicle. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry,
no, go ahead.
Can I interrupt? So is this the time when cars started to lose? Well, let me rephrase that. Is this the period when American cars started to lose their sense of style?
I think so, because I think they lost their sense of style because of a lot of different things around safety. One of them was the bumpers. You had to have that 5 mile an hour bumper, no damage type of impact, which I think with the materials at the time was making it look really funky, and it was messing up the entire design of the entire vehicle. Not to say that 5 mile an hour bumpers aren't really a great idea. It saves us all money. It saves us all, from a major crunch a bunch is what my dad used to say, because, you can the bumper is something that could be really replaced at a lower cost, and you didn't worry about the rest of the vehicle. But I think that compromised on design. I mean, that's what I've been thinking. Plus I think that cars were starting to become that more functionality. The cars that were coming online, surprising the cars that were winning the sales race were the GM Vega, the Ford Pinto, the Gremlin, the AMC Gremlin, and then of course the Volkswagen, Toyota, and the Datsun. But, that Pinto and the Gremlin and the Vega were not very reliable. They were very dangerous. But that's what people were buying.
Right.
So
it was definitely a time of upheaval for the industry for a number of different reasons.
It was, but I think when you go through that upheaval, you think about what it produced on the, after that decade was over. So when we were at the Italian car day, I was looking at the cars from the 70s, and I was kind of proud of the folks that kept those cars. The ones that really shone well were the foreign ones. The
Yeah.
foreign cars did, even the Ferrari, even though it was more boxy, and the interiors
Yep.
of them are stunning, and they didn't skimp on a lot of those details on the inside.
Right.
So yeah, the 70s is what I've been looking at. We may visit some more details into there, but I also was just kind of thinking about some of the new motors that were coming out. They were trying to look at electrical. As Beka just mentioned, we had the oil embargo, and that 74, 75 time frame when we were in, the price gouging for cars from the Middle East was crazy.
Yes.
And boy, people were struggling, which is why the Vegas and the Pintos and the Gremlins and the Volkswagens were in high demand.
I've heard the Gremlin is sort of an underrated muscle car in some degrees. I mean, there were some that were issued with the big V8 in them, and they
Yes, it's a shocking, and
it's like a thing you don't expect to say about a Gremlin.
It's an interesting experience to see one of those, but yes.
Yeah, and
well, cool. Dawn.
Absolutely. And then at the same time, the Lamborghini Countach came out, and there was a Jaguar that was really pretty awesome. So there were some things, they just weren't happening in America. They were really happening overseas in the 70s, which is an interesting thing. So yeah, I think we'll poke around in the 70s, but I wanted to, for some reason, it felt like the right time to talk about the 70s cars.
Yeah. No, good stuff. I wonder if the American corporate scene is just simply, I wonder if it simply gets in its own way from time to time in the way that the international market doesn't.
Yeah, but that could be. I'm kind of like wanting to dive into more Amanda's Subaru story, because now I'm wondering, the Subarus, I think they came out in 60 or 53 is maybe when the company was founded. So it's a company that's almost 70 years on the road. And I am kind of wondering about all of the impact. The foreign vehicles were kind of tooling around, still looking pretty snazzy. And we were stumbling. So hopefully, I think when we visit the 90s, we'll agree that was probably another era like that. And I'm hoping that the 2020s will result in some pretty snazzy things happening, because I think they are. I think they started happening about 3 or 4 years ago.
Style might be coming back. Yeah.
You are entirely correct, by the way. It was founded in July of 1953.
Thank you, Ambassador.
That was great.
Absolutely.
Beka, I wonder if, speaking of which, I'm switching gears back here for a second. You don't suppose that the Ford people have a Mustang Ambassador program, do you?
Well, I'm thinking that I should be the Mustang attaché. I think I can just dub myself that.
Right.
I honestly don't know if there's any sort of ambassador program, and it makes you wonder, how would I have not known by now?
Right.
Just from connections at dealerships and whatnot, it's something I can definitely check into.
You know what I'm going to say, which is to say, call them up and get the thing started for them.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, cool. Thank you, Dawn. Good stuff. I mean, I think you're right. You could spend many days talking about what happened in the automotive world of the 70s. There's plenty of material there to dig into.
Yeah. So I just want to give an overview, and let's not always disparage the 70s. I think sometimes they gave us the fits and starts that maybe got us to where we are today.
I think that's right. I mean, it's always upheaval. There's always something that erupts out of chaos that is better, I think. But
I mean, I was really thinking about cracking a joke in the expense of the Mustang too. By really, if you think about it, the early 70s, personally, I didn't like the direction Mustang was heading, and the Mustang 2 is what led us to the Fox chassis, and I absolutely love the Fox chassis.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I
yeah.
mean, on that kind of note, it was the chaos and the carnage of the 70s that at least led us to what I love.
Right.
Yep.
All right, very cool. Let's switch gears now and go to our listener viewer segment. I did this thing on my own Facebook page, not the Thing About Cars. Actually, it is on the Thing About Cars page, but I shared it to my own personal Facebook page and got some interesting results to this question. The question was, what is the worst car you ever owned? You get bonus points for amusing stories about the said vehicle. And I got a lot of stuff to share, so we may split this up over several episodes. The first person wrote, she says, this is from Kat. Kat says that her worst car was a Ford Tempo. She doesn't say what year. It was a Ford Tempo which caught on fire while she was sitting in a traffic jam in Chattanooga on I-24. Flames were spitting out from under the hood, and cars were going by shouting at me that my car was on fire, like she didn't know, rather than helping her out. Right. So people were shouting at her, but nobody stopped to help her.
Right.
Sounds accurate.
Right.
Nice
So
people.
she says, sure, that cloud of gray coming from under my car was the mist from a Stephen King novel.
That's cool. Not.
And later she adds, she says the fan had busted out. I don't know what that means, busted out, but she says the fan had busted out, which was apparently a common thing with Tempos. But
It's seized.
yeah.
Yes, and I know exactly what she means.
Yeah. Right. My friend Tori, Victoria, otherwise known as Tori, she says that her worst car was a Geo Metro.
Oh my.
Yeah, I mean, which I think is a Suzuki in disguise,
I think
right?
so.
Yeah, I believe so.
So she says it was so light that I was in danger of being blown off the lane and passed by heavy semis. She says, funny story, my one and only time attending Dragon Con, I could not find a parking spot. I had crammed that tiny car with 3 friends, male, all at least 5'10". She says, yes, the car tilted a bit when we did that. We finally found a spot where the car would technically fit, but I am horrible at parallel parking. She says, I got as close as I could, but was still too far from the curb. The guys simply folded themselves out of the car, bounced the car into place about a further 6 inches or so. So they literally bounced the car into their parallel parking spot.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my, that's hilarious.
Which that must have been in the late 80s at that point, 89, 90, 91 maybe. But there's more worse car stories to tell. But if the listener would go to our Thing About Cars Facebook page, we will have a post there somewhere on that page that invites you to tell us about the worst car you ever owned. And yes, there are bonus points for any amusing stories attached to that. Let's do the Grand Trivia auto answer and then wrap up the episode. What do you think?
Yeah, it sounds good.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So our question was, the Cannonball Run is an unofficial coast-to-coast automobile race that starts in what U.S. city? Is that city Miami, Florida, Savannah, Georgia, Washington, D.C., or New York City? Amanda, what do you think?
My guess would be maybe Miami, so that it could go sort of across the country.
Yeah. Beka.
Well, see, I was thinking New York until what you had said at the beginning made me kind of question it a little bit. And now I'm wondering if I'm confusing the cannonball with the gumball.
Oh.
So I'm still going to just stick with New York because that's where I was originally going to go. But I know the gumball started in New York. So.
Right. Dawn, what do you think?
I am surprised you have Savannah on here. So I'm thinking, is that a ringer? Is that like an outlier or is it the ringer? Is it the one that's like, okay, we're going from coast to coast, and
right.
Savannah would seem like an idyllic place to start, and you can run up. You're right there at the intersection of 95 and 16, or you could scoot down over to 10. So yeah. I'm going to say Savannah.
Well, the correct answer is actually New York City.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it goes all the way across the country, starting from New York. And I actually did not know that. I had somehow assumed it started in Miami. That was my first thought.
Where does it end up?
Where does the Cannonball end up?
Is it LA?
I think it is.
San Diego?
I'm trying to remember.
Well, San Francisco? It's LA.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's LA. Let's do a quick internet check here. The traditional starting point of the Cannonball Run is the Red Ball Garage on East 31st Street in Manhattan. And its finish is in the Portofino Hotel in Redondo Beach, California.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I think those kind of cross country races would be fun to do because they take so many. I mean, driving a car around a track, I know takes skill, going left all the time, but
left,
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 left.
left.
But like cross country, and of course I love Le Mans, but just even further, like a cross country takes so many. Just like endurance and really knowing your vehicle because you don't have a pit crew. I think that would be fun to do.
Yeah, you have to handle all that yourself if you're out on doing cross country for sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But we've talked about this before. The last time I've seen even anything similar happen in Georgia was something called a Cornball Run, which was back in the mid 90s at that point. I think it must have been 94, 95. And
cornball was the best they could come up with.
Well, that's what they called it. Don't ask me. And yeah,
that is so.
And the idea for that particular race was that you had to buy a car for less than $2,000, and that was what you did between here and something like Vegas. Right.
Gotcha.
Oh my gosh, that would be fun.
Kind of like that lemon racer. What's it?
Fun.
Yeah. Well, not the Le Mans, but the lemons. Yes.
Yes. Not the Le Mans.
Right. Right. So it was that kind of thing. Yeah. Right. It was less than 2,000 total. So even if you bought a car and then had to repair it, the cost of the car plus the repairs could not exceed $2,000 or something.
That was going to be my question. Could you soup it up?
Right.
But no.
Right. So, but the thing that I think prevents that from happening now is insurance. People have liability and litigation fears, and
sure.
Unless even a waiver doesn't actually remove you from the exposure to legal risk. It kind of helps, but it's not bulletproof. A waiver is not bulletproof. So. Anyway, Amanda, thank you for being our guest today. I hope you thought it was a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me.
I certainly did. Yeah. And we should do this again sometime.
Absolutely.
I'm excited to talk to an ambassador. How cool was that?
Nikki likes riding in the back seat.
I'm happy to do that. This episode of Thing About Cars, the 3 girls and a guy in the back seat is a lot of fun. I think we should do this again.
Yeah.
But to our listeners, thank you for joining us. As always, we welcome your feedback and your ratings. If you would take a moment to rate us on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts, wherever you hear us, that helps us become more visible, and we really appreciate that. And in the meantime, we hope you and yours are staying safe. If you have any questions or comments for the show, guest connections, or anything like that, please drop us a line via our Facebook page or our website. That's thethingaboutcars.com. And we will see you guys with another episode in about a week. Take care, you guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. This has been The Thing About Cars. We'll see you on the road.